It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time where you get to ask the icons of the event anything. So, you might be wondering, how do you get to ask questions? All you have to do is use the question panel on the right of GoToWebinar to submit your questions. Or you can hop on Twitter to submit your questions with the hashtag EventIcons. We'll be answering your questions live during the entire show. Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better conversation we can have. So please help share hashtag EventIcons on Twitter and Facebook. Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com. Now, without any further delay, this is hashtag EventIcons with your hosts, Will Curran of Endless Entertainment and Laura Lopez of Social Tape.
The man.
Oh, yeah. We are here today. I am back. It is Will Curran. Unfortunately, Laura is hanging out in the background today helping answer questions. I'm sure we're going to get her back on the show soon. But today I am going to talk about one of my favorite topics. We are doing part two. Part two. That's right. There was a part one of this, of how to save a crap ton of money on your AV. This was such a big topic and something I'm so passionate about that we had to turn into a two-parter. And thank the Lord we did, because we had so many questions last week. We have a lot more questions to answer and talk about, and we wanted to give you guys something a little bit special, so we brought in a whole new panel for you guys, so you can get a completely new perspective from some of the best icons in the events industry, and I'm so excited to have these guys on the show because they are absolutely amazing. These guys, I just got to jump right in, and we got to talk about this because we need as much time as possible to talk about how to save money on your AV. So let's just jump right on in. Let's start off with Mr. Tommy. Tommy is in the house. Tommy and I met in IMEX, and he is the founder of EventCollab. If you haven't heard of EventCollab, it is an amazing software that you should be using to plan all of your events. Imagine that project management software you're using designed just for events. Really, really cool. Allows you to manage your budgets and your tasks, and it's super duper cool. But we're not here to talk about EventCollab just alone today, but we're actually here to talk about his former history, technically current still history as an AV designer, and as part of Level 2 Designs, and has gotten to do some amazing events. He literally was telling me about an event they were doing where they had to do all this crazy stuff with creating content on the fly, and they had to do a bunch of AR, augmented reality stuff, and I was just like, we have to get you on the show to talk about this. And I know Tommy and I had a very passionate conversation about how in-house companies need to let the little guys in and not be hurting people with fees, so we knew we had to get him on the show. So everybody, please welcome Tommy to the show.
Hey, Tommy.
All right. And then you're very welcome. I'm glad to have you on the show. And also in the house, Megan Powers. Megan actually works with EventCollab, taking care of all their awesome marketing stuff. She's fantastic. Also met at IMEX, and we had her actually on the IMEX episode. So you had to go check out episode, I got to memorize the episode, 36 or whatever it was, and we had Megan on the show, and it was so awesome to have you. And we had an amazing conversation as well back in the day at IMEX. And you used to be an account exec, correct, for an AV company as well?
So yeah, I used to sell AV production. I started out in a venue, and then I sold everything from centerpiece to a widescreen high-def show, and went on from there. And now, yeah, I'm helping to market event technology, which marketing is my passion. So.
Very cool. And, you know, we had that very passionate conversation again about AV, and you were on the episode last week too, and you were in the comments section, and we're like, oh my gosh, we have to get Megan on board because she knows all about this. And, you know, I'm always really passionate about people who used to be in AV and now do something different, because they can take that AV perspective that they have and kind of apply it to something new as well. So we're just honored to have you, Miss Megan, in the house.
Thanks.
Awesome. And last but not least is Damian. Damian and I also met at IMEX. We all met at IMEX. So it was a really, really good time. And
love at first sight.
Love at first sight, indeed. And you were competing in the event startup app competition, tech competition at IMEX alongside EventCollab. And you guys, learning about what you're doing, I got so jazzed and so excited. You created basically a system for people to, you know, and we'll probably talk about it in a little bit, but how to save money by sharing resources amongst events, and really brilliant concept I've stressed with clients for a long time to do this sort of stuff. And you're basically creating a system for clients to do this very turnkey and very easily. So I knew I had to have you. And you also, your past roots are very similar to mine. Used to be DJ, turn production guy, turn.
I wasn't DJ. You just get confused because my name is Damian John.
Oh,
DJ.
that's right. Everyone says, I keep thinking you're a DJ because then you have the badass headphones we were talking about and everything too.
I'm into sound, but I'm probably the less tech savvy out of us all. I come from lugging. I come from the bottom end of the event industry and then sort of work my way to where I am now. But I'll tell you about that in a bit.
Yeah, we'll talk about it in just a sec. So we're going to tease everybody on that one. But I always, because your Twitter username is DJ, and I always think you're a DJ. And you also have that like DJ swagger with it too. So.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Well, these guys, and everyone, please welcome Damian to the show. Please, amazing to have you on show.
Thank you.
Need like the clapping sound effect. All right, so. Obviously very excited for this topic, so I want to try to dive right in as fast as possible into this. So we want to learn a little bit about your background, though, for everyone that's here so they can understand, what got you in the events industry, what got you into AV and understanding AV, or what got you out of AV eventually for us. So why don't we kick it off, Damian, if you want to start it off by explaining a little bit about what your background is, and how you came from sound guy to running what you do now.
Well, I wasn't really a sound guy. I mean, before I came to London, I'm from South Africa. Someone said that a mate of mine was earning £17 an hour building stages and helping with AV. So, I started work at the bottom end, working for the largest crewing company in Europe. I mean, I'm talking about unloading trucks, decks, setting up sound lights, building marquees for weeks on end, back to back at one location. Setting up festivals. I basically did anything you could think of in the event industry, and and then started working in the office, running crew, managing crew, then got into health and safety, venue management, and then after the Olympics, that was my biggest health and safety job. I started my own crewing company. So what we would in essence, we would be selling to AV companies. Those were our customers. Production companies and AV companies were our customers, and I was also getting into a bit of online technology, and someone told me, if you want to get into online tech, solve a problem in your industry. And the biggest issue I had, particularly working for a crewing company and being part of it, I mean, we would spend 2 days setting up this one massive event, unloading the truck, setting up a gig, and then only to have a 3-hour event, then spend the whole evening breaking it down, next morning load the truck, 7 o'clock, few hours, and then stay at that venue for the next, wait there for 2 more hours, and then work for a totally new production company to start a totally new event to do almost exactly the same thing. And there was this lacking of communication between event owners, event organizers, that I couldn't quite understand, and I would see it so many times happen. And then I actually would have clients, production companies, bringing their clients together back to back and saving money. So I thought, well, it happens with the event owners that have a large amount of events, but it doesn't happen between separate event organizers. And that's when I started working on ShowSlice, which basically breaks down the barrier of communication, so that event organizers can share similar infrastructure costs back to back, whether it be a marquee on a beach in Thailand or just the stage set and the AV setup, which as you know can take quite a bit of time to set up.
Absolutely. So I think we're going to definitely have to come back to that for sure, to talk a little bit about how can, maybe even if they're using ShowSlice, or if they can try to do it on their own, or how can people realize the shared resource. Obviously, hopefully they're using ShowSlice, but how can people
I've got a lot to say about that in a bit. So I can. There's things that people should be doing that anyone can do.
Awesome,
so, yeah.
Awesome. And Damian, if you weren't in the events industry, what would you be doing instead?
Well, I'm an entrepreneur. I had my own dessert company before. I discovered a new type of frozen dessert, so I was doing that for a while. But it would be in business. But outside of business, I probably wanted to become an actor.
Ooh, I could totally see you becoming an actor.
I would have enjoyed that, just being someone else for
awesome.
a while.
I love it. Awesome. Megan, why don't you tell us a little bit about what got you into the event and AV space and what you're up to now?
So like most people, it happened on accident. I was working for a .com got hit by the dot-com bomb and had an opportunity. I had been in marketing previously, managing events, and someone said, hey, this new venue needs an event planner. Can I give them your resume? And I said, sure. Well, it turned out to be a sales planning job, sort of. So, and then I moved on from there after a few years to selling event production. I love events, and the first company I worked for had an opportunity to also be a part of the planning. And then when I moved over to AV Concepts, it became more of like a hardcore production, really video-rich company that I was working for, and got to work with awesome companies like Oracle and all that good stuff. So yeah, and then things kind of took a turn. It's funny, you mentioned like, and what made you leave it? It was a combination of things. Sort of what pushed me off the ledge was an interaction with a customer, which I know that's like taboo, right? Customers are never wrong. But so anyway, so that's kind of how that went down, and through a journey of different things, I ended up with my own marketing consulting business, and events are my jam. I love passion for event technology, and when Tommy first talked to me about EventCollab, I was stoked because I knew it was something that the industry needs. When I sold AV, I wished that we had a tool that helped us manage our projects more seamlessly. So so I'm working with different technology companies, but of course EventCollab's my favorite.
I love it. I love it. Don't say that just because Tommy's in the room. Awesome. And then, Megan, what would you be doing if you weren't in the events industry?
I would be a sports reporter, sports anchor.
Ooh, what's your favorite sport?
So, tennis and football are kind of my top two.
Okay.
But you have to like all the sports. So as a reporter, if I was calling games, I would definitely want to do tennis, or be a sideline reporter for football or baseball.
I love it. Tommy, all right, you got to tell everyone the story of what got you in the events industry, because I know it's absolutely fascinating. Oh no, did we lose Tommy for a second?
Tommy,
no. Tommy might have been frozen. We might need him to reconnect real quick. I was like, man, he's really holding that pose really strong. Really good.
Tommy, well, I'm actually interested. First of all, just let us know, if you weren't such a great production company and DJ as you were, what would you be doing?
Oh, that's hard. You're asking the interviewer the question. So, for everyone who doesn't know, so I started off as a DJ, and then we started basically hiring AV companies, and we decided, okay, we can make our better AV company, so we decided to create an AV company. But if I weren't doing this, I would probably be doing something in the forms of probably marketing, to be honest, because I'm really passionate about content creation and sharing really, really awesome content that people can leverage to, understand things. I mean, that was our big thing with Endless was, hey, let's take the veil off of the AV industry and share what, it looks like underneath.
And what you're doing right now is almost the same thing, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that I'm really, what I do right now is perfect because I get to do a little bit of everything, but I do that, or I probably, something content marketing related, or to be honest, I don't know. I'm the more we do events with more 5 or 6 camera shoots or something like that, I love broadcast. So I feel I would work in a broadcast studio or for a news station, because just that thrill of the show is happening. Doing this is so exciting where it's all live, figuring out that sort of stuff. I love that element. It is just so fascinating and so exciting for sure. So I definitely think I would be doing something like that.
Well, it shows. So.
I would also probably be Batman too if I could, if I had the pain tolerance. Awesome. All right, cool. Well, I'll have the team try to figure out what's going on with Tommy, but we'll keep moving on. When we get Tommy back in here, we'll have to hear his epic story of what got him in to this. But one question that we kind of want to start off with, we started this one off last time, and I know it's the most controversial question amongst AV people, but you guys obviously have either worked inside of them, you've hired them, you've worked being hired by them. Why is AV so expensive, and why do you think this is such a big misconception in the events industry?
Yeah.
Damian, you got an idea. Let's go for it.
Well, I mean, it's a misconception. I mean, it is expensive because it's a big chunk of the budget. But, there's a lot, as you know yourself. First, the equipment. costs, right? So actually owning the equipment yourself, or I mean, as in an AV company, owning the equipment or hiring it from another AV company costs. But then it's also the storage of it, the maintenance of it, the logistics of it, the crew to unload and load, to set up, and then obviously the operating costs, who's actually using the gear on site. So I mean, there's a lot to it. It's not just bang. And I mean, if it's in-house, it's in-house. But if it's a bit of kit to come in, then yeah, there's no doubt why it would cost a lot.
Damian, I mean, you've done so much stuff with labor and different companies, and then Mr. Tommy's back, so we'll have to jump into his story. Well, why is event labor specifically very expensive? Because people look at this and they go, oh my gosh, $45 an hour, $55 an hour. Why is an AV engineer technician paid so highly?
Yeah, well, I mean, why? Well, I mean, because also bear in mind it is a professional job. Okay, so there is a standard rate, but there's also a markup attached to it, as you know. But the work involved. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, being a lighting designer, it's not as easy as it looks. You can watch those guys sweat while they're mixing the light. I mean, depending on what the gig is, it's quite a stressful job because it's live. And they make a mistake, then it's on them. Sometimes, obviously, the guests don't notice because they don't notice what's actually happened. But professionals do notice, and they are good at what they do for a reason.
Absolutely.
Well,
Megan, what about you? Why is AV so expensive?
I think it's that whole too. When I read that, compared to what? Right? I mean, because it's a line item in the budget. It has a cost. There is equipment, there is labor. You have to consider, even if you're only a half day, that video engineer gave up an entire day that he could have worked for someone else to work for you, yeah. So you have to pay him for a full day. So there's those sorts of things that add up. And yeah, obviously, I mean, Brant touched on it last week. Labor's the biggest cost, but there is, like Damian said, all the costs associated with keeping up that gear. And it's funny because I've heard lots of people say, well, we'll just bring our own projector, or I could buy a TV for that much, and it's like, go for it. More power to you, and then you have to ship it, and who's going to set it up, and do you have the cables, and there's all these other things that go along with it. It depends obviously on the level of your show. If you have 20 people in a room, that's a different story than if you have 3,000 people. And everyone needs to hear and see everything that's going on stage. So, but I think at the bottom line, it's all about communication and upfront talking with your AV companies, whether they're already on your team or if you're shopping for them, about what you're trying to accomplish. Like if I can do this with plastic speakers, I'll do it with plastic speakers. Tell me what your budget is and how many people are in the room and what what's the most important, what are the hot buttons for your CEO, and what are your attendees, is there anything that's gone wrong in the past that we need to concentrate on, make sure that obviously we want everything right, but sometimes, if video was the hot button and that's why the company got fired from the year before, you're going to pay a whole lot more attention to video, and maybe, more of your budget's going to be dedicated to that.
Yeah, I think scope of work is a big thing too. Well, one of the things is what we've seen over an event that we might be doing for 5 or 6 years, that line item budget hasn't changed very much, but the scope of work with the needs of AV on a program with the technology has grown significantly. So again, that's part of that communication between event organizers, event planners, agencies, to really understand what is the real scope of work and the need of this event this year. As opposed to what we did last year, because every year the scope seems to be changing and shifting a lot, but the numbers not changing or shifting a lot.
You mean the budget, you mean?
In the budget, correct.
Yeah. Interesting. Tommy, since we kind of lost you there for a sec, do you mind telling everyone, I mean, you talked about you have clients you've been working with for 6 years. Can you tell everyone a little bit about your background and kind of what you do, how you got into this industry, how you got to where you are, and how you've been dealing with clients for 6 years, and where you are now?
Great. I'd love to. So unlike a lot of people, I fell into this industry as a teenager. I started as a stagehand, fell in love with lighting design and production design, and built my career in this industry. It's an industry I love, and it's my whole life. It's what I've been a part of my whole life. But 18 years ago, I started Level 2 Design, and the focus of Level 2, it's a live event company. We provide technical direction, technical services, and production design services to event planners, agencies and clients. So what we do, we're typically the interface point when people are trying to negotiate between what is the creative vision of the show and how do we implement that vision. So we work in all aspects of helping plan, put the right teams together, the right engineers, and the right suppliers to support that. Level 2 does 80 to 100 events a year, so we're actively and constantly in the event cycle of planning and working on events with our clients. And then recently, last 2 years, out of all the process that we built at Level 2, we started EventCollab. And EventCollab is project management software for the events industry. We really wanted to focus on the industry that we knew. So that's a startup that's 2 years old.
Awesome, awesome. I love it. I love it. I always love when like a need comes out of what you've been doing every single day, because this is where the best products kind of come out. Awesome, awesome. I love it. I love you. Man, we're such a good crew. I'm just so excited about our panel that we have today. I'm like fangirling over here. So we didn't get a chance to dive into this much last week. So I want to try to if you're looking to learn more about like how do you save money from the in-house fees and things like that. Last week's going to be your episode. Go check that one out after this episode, obviously.
That was a great episode, Will. That was an
amazing episode. Really, really in depth. Really great strategies to saving a ton of money on AV. But I want to get really nitty-gritty into how people can actually save a lot of money on their AV. So my question to you is, if you have like go-tos for saving money on AV, where do you recommend planners start to look if they're trying to save money? Maybe they're at a $50,000 budget and they need to get down to $40,000, or maybe they're at $100,000 and trying to get to $70,000 because budget cuts, they need to get an event app in this year, whatever it may be. How would you recommend they go about in strategy for figuring out what to save? Let's start off. Tommy, why don't you kick it off? Where would you recommend that your clients start to look when they're looking to save for AV?
I think the most important part that you start off with is the planning side. Is before you engage any suppliers or any team that's going to cost money on your budget or your event, is to really do the core planning. When, where, why, how. So put a good schedule together so you have a clear schedule of when you have access to the venue, what's the load and parameters, understanding what your needs are, because a lot of times, again, you have a very straightforward, you need, AV for 20 breakouts, or it's a much more complicated general session for 10,000 people. Those are two different scope of works that require you to really think about what your needs are. Do that planning before you engage suppliers, because if you think about it, AV suppliers are doing show after show, and if you want a quote from them, the more information you could give, the more realistic scope you could give, the better chance you get to get real numbers from them. And it goes through the entire flow of the project.
Yeah, when looking for the venue, like start that, get that all nailed in before looking for the venue, and then you can be really firm with negotiating your contracts.
Because when we start with projects, if you're starting with a project and you don't know where it is, you don't know the exact dates, you don't know how many show days, that's a lot of information, that's a lot of guessing work that you're going to just extend that to the entire team. And the numbers are going to be vastly different, again, maybe if you're getting quotes from suppliers, because everyone's going to make assumptions. The least assumptions you bring to the less they make, the more accurate your numbers are going to be.
I love that.
And I mean, just to take it back a bit, because that's perfect. Of course, planning and communication and being detail orientated, getting the right brief. But also what I've seen and what we do right now is all about negotiation and bringing price down and positive influence. But the whole thing is now, if you're procuring a supplier and you're doing this event and it's an annual event, you should use the powers that you have to bring down the cost. So you're talking to the supplier and you're saying, well, look, we want you to be our preferred supplier. And start using that power and talk about using them a lot more, and you can actually leverage that to bring the price down. If you can guarantee further business, if you have more than one event, then good for you. I mean, I know clients that do 120 events a year in London, and they use that as much as they can, to the extent that they use their preferred AV company, and they even dictate what crewing company that AV company should use. So then they go directly to the crewing company, pay basically, because as we know, AV companies put a markup of from 50 to 250%. I know in London they do. Anyway, and yeah, so you can leverage the power of what you have. Now, if it's a once-off event, then make it work for you, But I find that actually can bring the cost down.
Yeah. And Damian brought up a great point. It's knowing your data. Everybody talks about in the industry, you've heard the big terms over the years, big data. Well, we have an opportunity, whether an event planner is doing 3 shows a year or 200 shows a year, you have data over those shows that you could use to your advantage. For example, who are the suppliers you're using the most and which suppliers you should leverage? You should have that data inside of your company or your organization that you're planning events for. Because to me, that's the most important thing. We hear that a lot when we're working with agencies. They might want to look at the budget line item and they want to take it off the tech costs, meaning all of the AV, staging, scenic, and labor. Well, that's fine, but it's good to know the numbers and who you want to work with. If you're going to ask for a deal from a supplier, what does that relationship look like? Are you giving them the kind of work that warrants the kind of discount you're requesting for this maybe one time?
Ooh. Okay, so some really solid points. I love it. Is leveraging the amount of big events that you're doing. I think also along with that is maybe leveraging your brand too. I mean, there's some planners out there, they don't know that they're planning events for like companies like us. We want to have them as a client because we just want to have their name on our website. Yeah. So saying, if for example a big client like, let's say Facebook comes along and says, hey, we want to work with you for this event. I mean, we're willing to give a discount because we want to have people tell people Facebook's one of our clients, right? So that, and also the number of events. I think Tommy also brought up a really, really good point about the details. We talked about it last week that far too often, especially on the labor side, people just put in, oh, I think the schedule is about this, and then the schedule turned out to be wildly different, and then you end up getting an invoice afterwards for extra labor because you didn't give the right schedule. So yeah, definitely specificity is insanely powerful. What about you, Megan? What areas do you think that are good for planners to save?
So this is going to come as no surprise probably to anybody, but internet is what I've been hearing is the biggest thing that people feel like they're getting gouged on. And I think it's the biggest opportunity for a venue to be a hero instead of just charging what they can charge because they can. I interviewed 18 planners for a client on internet and at their events, and kind of how it is to deal with in-house and all that kind of stuff. And we don't need to get into a whole in-house versus out-of-house discussion, but there's definitely advantages that are being taken there, and I think that it's up to the planning community to like sort of stand together and be firm in those negotiations. And I know that AV companies are losing business. The small guys are losing business because the in-house is packaging that internet with the AV and really sort of handcuffing them to using the in-house. And it's not just about numbers, it's about familiarity with your show and the trust level that you have with this AV company that may be traveling with you. I mean, if they've been doing 5 shows with you a year for 10 years and suddenly they've got a $40,000 disparity in their budget, that planner may end up feeling like they have to use the in-house, and then they're sort of starting over. So I think internet's a big opportunity, and there are outside companies that you can use. It's against the law, actually, FCC law, for in-house to require you to use them. So I think there's an opportunity. For example,
one of them that you recommended me at IMEX was tradeshowinternet.com, right? As an example, I've been recommending them to all my clients because, the ability to do it. Do you have any other examples of out-of-house, like internet companies that people can go to, or is Trade Show Internet kind of like the big player?
Yeah, well, there's a couple, but I don't know them off the top of my head.
It's okay, I called you out on it.
Yeah, there's ShowNet. There's quite a few companies that that are specialized in event internet. Like we all have specialties in the event industry, and those are really important because what they can do is really help you navigate the internet process at a venue. So, for example, at a large convention center, they already know the rules. Sort of like a labor provider or something like that. They have that same capability to help you navigate especially if you're doing a large event that you need internet throughout, throughout a large convention center or a hotel.
And they probably worked there before as well, anyway. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we have a great question from the audience, and I'm so sorry. This is when I is it Angela? I'm gonna guess Angela. Pierce had a question about run-throughs and rehearsals. So as we know, a lot of times you have a very complex run of show. You have a lot of things going on. Her question is basically, how do you determine when it's a good idea to do a run-through or rehearsal? Obviously, it adds things like labor costs and things like that to it. But when do you really need to have a rehearsal with your AV company or a tech run-through? What are your guys' thoughts on that? When should you invest in having the labor be around for a rehearsal?
Sure, I could. I think one of the first important things, depending on the scale and size of your show, if you have an opening performance or you have production aspects like a large opening that requires a lot of technical teams between departments, you need to do a rehearsal. You need to schedule that time within your budget and the schedule of the event prior to show. I see a lot of events where a speaker ready room could do a lot with a lot smaller team, or what we call a previs environment. And a previs environment we set up for larger shows often where we previs the lighting, so the lighting team has a chance to program in a 3D environment, digital environment, as well as if you're doing large projection mapping or you have a lot of content across large displays with projection, the previs room is a great way, without spending all that time on labor in the room, to get creative and the production teams on board with what the content and through the rundown of the show. So an example would be is we set up these monitors, we go put those stakeholders in the room, they can look at transitions, they can make decisions in a room with 6 people instead of 30 people on the show. So that's a great way. When you have speakers, the other part is a speaker ready room gives you that capability for speakers to come in, look at their content, make updates, where you're not spending that time on stage with a large production team making those edits and basically speaker ready kind of scenarios.
Awesome. So you recommend like some sort of pre-visualization, like a CAD design with renderings of lights and video, plus and a speaker ready room to kind of catch speakers before they have questions that they bring to the AV company that maybe someone else could answer.
That's correct.
Awesome. Cool. Damien, yeah, sorry you had an idea. I totally interrupted.
No, but I think what Angela was also asking is, like, when could you actually avoid not doing it, or can you cut costs doing it? The question is under what circumstances. But I mean, Tommy's right. If you've got a live band or live performance, you've got to run through it irrespective. It's just saving money in that way is just you've got to be careful, because if you don't run through it, then you're going to have problems, which it's going to affect your show. So yeah, I suppose Tommy hit the nail on the head there, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Well, and talk through it with your TD in advance when you're working on that budget.
What's a TD?
Technical director, who's the one who should be doing those run-throughs. Because I had a situation where I had a technical director who fell a little short, and we had that time blocked out, and he was not leading that time well, and it just fell apart. So it depends on how complicated the show is. Also, if you have 20 people on and off the stage, timing becomes really important. So that's something to consider.
Yeah, it puts a lot of stress on the crew as well. If you're trying to get it in just before the gig, it does put a lot of stress before the big moment.
Yeah, that was going to be my suggestion, is making sure, you have that gap, big enough gap, too. So talking to your AV company and saying, like, this is what we're trying to do. We've had it where, they do one session and they're like, all right, and now we're going to bring a band on. And we're like, well, we need time to sound check. We need to do all that sort of stuff. Or, for example, unfortunately, very common now is we're getting a lot of people who rent out like one gigantic ballroom and then airwall it and then are separating and rejoining rooms and things like that, and they expect like transitions to happen like that. So making sure that if you are doing any sort of transitions or things like that, you have that time built in, and that you're also not doing it, big cost saver right here, not doing it during things like lunch breaks or dinner breaks and things like that, because then that's when you get into overtime and added costs as well.
Yeah, this is a rule, is to learn. If it helps and I know this is a big answer to your question, but I think you brought up a few good points, Will. One of them is a schedule tends to work in a 5-hour block or a 6-hour and out block. Once whoever is in helping you manage the schedule and the on-site event, you have to understand the labor rules. And if you understand the labor rules, then it puts you in a position to work in those rules where you're not getting hit with meal penalties, double time, a lot of things that, short term that really affects your budget pushing forward. And that's the biggest part of that is really setting that schedule up and getting the team to buy off on that schedule. It's the most important part. And when I say the team, meaning your AV suppliers, your client, and the production team, everybody needs to be in line on that schedule. When you're not aligned, that's where all of it goes sideways, meaning you're working in a meal penalty and all of those things are happening.
But what I found with my clients, I mean, like last year we're doing 3 events back to back, and they use ShowSlice because they save time, they save money. The first event is set up and they have their rehearsal, and then because we're bringing similar events with similar infrastructure requirements together, and the same production company is doing it the whole way through, you find all we have to do overnight is change the branding, the set's already in there, and then we have the whole day for rehearsals. So, planners, depending on the size of their event, but if they plan a particularly large event, finding other events to share that infrastructure with gives you that time, gives you that downtime for rehearsal. So, you just got to be savvy about it. There are many, many ways to do it.
I'm going to keep teasing everybody about what ShowSlice is all about and that concept because I think it's really game-changing. But we got a question from the audience asking, they want to know a little bit more about basic labor rules. So we talked about things like meal penalties, overtime, things like that. Can you guys talk a little bit about, like, what are the big labor rules that you're seeing that are affecting, clients having, costs rise through the roof? Megan, you want to kick it off?
Well, I think these guys would be better. I haven't been working in that piece of it for a while. So,
did you ever see like something that a lot of your clients were maybe like losing a lot of money off of? For example, like doing really early load-ins or something like that.
Forgetting that the crew needs to eat. I mean, just flat out, like, you have to build in break times. Feeding them makes a lot of sense, especially if you're in a venue where it's quite a hike to get to anywhere to eat, all that kind of stuff, which I think was touched on last week. But yeah, it's like crew is it's worth it, I think, to have if you feed them, the break can be shorter typically. So you keep them on site and you keep them a lot happier, that's for sure. When you provide, I mean, I had clients who didn't even have water backstage. It's like,
yep.
Provide a little bit of sustenance and some beverages and coffee, especially, right, Tommy? AV guys,
yes.
Coffee.
They love coffee.
Provide that coffee, and there's so much goodwill there that will make everyone happier.
The rule of thumb is pretty straightforward, but there's every city, whether it's union or non-union, has rules. But the common rules to follow if you're just building a document is 5-hour blocks between meals. If you're starting a schedule at 6 in the morning, those first couple of hours are probably on time and a half. If you start on an 8 o'clock call or a 7:30 call, those are typically starting on regular time. You need to watch, after a 10-hour day, you start going into overtime. With union, a lot of times that's 8 hours. So you need to think about how you're planning your day when you hit 8 hours. A lot of times your labor component, your local labor component, starts to go into time and a half. After 12 hours, you're typically in double time. And then the last part to watch out towards the end of that is short term, meaning there's rules. The typical rule is 8 hours rest period between, the next call. Some areas on the West Coast in particular are now 9 hours. So you have to have a rest between the call the day before into the call the next day. If you don't have that rest period, everyone starts in short term, which is double time starting that day. So that can really eat your budget fast in labor.
So there's almost a scenario where someone can be in sharp turn, go into double time, and then because they're going into a 12-hour day, almost doing overtime in double time, and you're just compounding basically the hourly rate at that point.
Compounding. The bottom line is to really understand the rules that you're working in the labor that you're dealing with, and to set your schedule to benefit the show, and again, get the team on board with that. Because again, I think there's not many people that want to be working short term or working, at 2 in the morning. But if that's what is the need of the show, everyone will do it. So again, it's planning your schedule to work.
Do you think it's up to the clients to figure this stuff out? Or like, for example, like in my opinion, right, it should be they give the schedule to the AV company, they see all these issues pop up and they say, hey, just a heads up, here's what your labor is going to look like. You could fix it, this and that. Or do you think the clients need to know all these labor rules?
It's fuzzy. I think the more you're educated, if you're handling, if that's a line item in your budget, you should at least understand the basics of it. That's how I approach that. And again, it's education, whether it's necessarily not your job. You should understand, even if you're a producer or you're an event planner, you should understand those rules so that you could communicate that to your customer, or or communicate that to an event. And I think it's that dialogue. It's really important. You've heard this before. So often people, you're 2 weeks out or a month out from an event and you still haven't seen a schedule because it's not ready yet. We like to take the approach of get it 60, 70% and let's get it to everyone to start commenting on. And let's start a dialogue. Because what tends to happen is some people, we might have a supplier that has a really good idea for a challenging schedule. So the concept is get your suppliers, get your team in the mix, have everybody look at the 60, 80% and have a dialogue before you say this is the final schedule. Because a tweak of 2 hours here and there could affect you drastically on any sort of schedule when you're trying to get to that last part of loadout.
I love it. I love it. Damian, what about you? I know it's a little bit different, obviously, across the pond, but do you guys have any labor rules over there that we haven't kind of mentioned that you think clients need to watch out for?
It's not quite labor rules, but I mean, we do call it health and safety, and we have Health and Safety at Work Act. So, we have to look after our staff, and it goes with any company. And in the event industry, actually, until quite recently, I mean, I would say about 8 years ago, there was nothing. I mean, I remember I was doing 76 hours a week. Sometimes I wouldn't sleep for 56 hours straight. Those were the days, 8 years ago, and now they do control it. Now, we can't work more than 12-hour shifts, but it's still happening. But we don't have any other sort of other rules other than the welfare facility, but it doesn't put any really extra cost on the clients. So I'm actually quite intrigued to learn more about this. The union this union factor that you guys have to deal with. I mean, it's very interesting for us to consider when we come to North America with ShowSlice. So I'm actually learning from this panel now. So yeah, very interesting.
Awesome. I always love it when we can teach our panelists something too.
Yeah.
Man, again, I knew this was going to happen. We're so passionate about this topic. We're running, getting low on time, but I want to talk a little bit about creative ideas for people to save money. So I want to kick it back to you, Damian, to talk a little bit about, starting off maybe with the concept of ShowSlice. I told everyone we get to this eventually. Starting off with that, that's obviously a really creative idea. The idea that, hey, we have an AV setup. Let's get 2 clients and put their events back to back, so then the setup doesn't have to be rebuilt and built again. Let's just change the branding around and save money. Can you talk a little bit about, how can people pull this idea off? How can people interact with other event planners to figure this out? All that sort of stuff. And then Megan and Tom, if you guys want to think about other creative ideas, I think to save money would be awesome.
It's exactly what we do. I mean, you can look at it as like, I suppose, Airbnb. You can either pick up the phone and phone that person or knock on his door and say, "Can I sleep at your house?" Right? Or Airbnb goes and puts it out there on the platform so you can see what's out there and buy it, so to speak. But the whole thing of what we do now is Venue Finder. I mean, before we launched the second version of our platform, which in essence, all it does is advertise available dates adjacent to already confirmed bookings. Then we put you in contact, not with the other organizer, with the actual suppliers, because they're the ones that are communicating between each organizer, so with the venue and the supplier. But very easily, and agencies have been doing this for years as well, very easily, you could call up a big venue, and find out what's going on in the afternoon. If there's a big luncheon, you can change over the branding and have your AGM or your award ceremony or whatever dinner in the evening. It's not very difficult. We just did it the other day. One of the clients come to us, and just like a venue finder, what any agency could do, call up the venues, call up several venues, and find out what's going on. You can actually, if you start fishing, it won't take you long to find another setup that is quite similar to yours. And you just have to go to those venues. If you've got a 500 packs dinner or 1,000 packs dinner, go to those venues that do your sort of event and start asking them. And you'll be surprised how many
you call up the venues and say like, hey, does anyone have something similar to this? And what do the dates look like? And maybe try to.
The venues know, and there is a confidentiality issue there, but they don't mind because they're going to get that sale. So they're actually quite motivated to put you in contact with the production company that's dealing with the show.
Okay, cool, very cool.
It's funny because that's happening, you know, in a place like in the UK, so many of those venues are booked really tight, where we have the luxury in the US, we didn't have, you know, we could take 3-4 days to put in a show, but we're seeing that squeeze dramatically over the last few years. So this is becoming what I consider a problem or something we all need to look at in the US now. For example, there's a project we're doing in February where I called the TD that's representing the show that's in before us, because we have a 4-day load-in schedule is now 2.5 days with overnights. So we're having to, so we were working behind the scenes, regardless of the client and the venue, just to understand what is his loadout look like and what does my load-in look like and how can we work together. What's interesting about that same venue, I then got a call for the show behind us, the TD calling us saying, what's your loadout schedule? So that's 2 events in a row that are booked really tight. So same for his situation. He had a 4-day load-in prior. Now he has a 3-day load-in. And he was just trying to figure out when are we going to be clear, what rigging company we're using, so maybe we could share some resources. So, you know, again, so there's trucks that don't have to get loaded. That gear could stay in the room. So it's definitely happening in the U.S. more and more.
And now that millennials are getting used to being flexible, you know, because now we can sleep in boats instead of sleeping in hotels, you know, and now these buyers, these millennial buyers, so to speak, are actually more flexible. Like, what other ideas are out there, you know? I mean, you know, my event's still going to be special. I'm still going to have my entertainment. I'm still going to have my branding, but, you know, maybe there's a middle stage setup with the dodgems, you know, bumper cars in the corner. I like that idea, you know, so they actually feed off other people's idea. And just as much as a venue is, you know, shaped, you know, U-shape or horse shape or horseshoe shape, that same venue would have temporary infrastructure that's got a middle stage setup. So there's no reason why the whole week events can't use it back to back. So it's all about being flexible. And the more flexible you are, more choice you have, and obviously more money you can save.
I love it. Megan, you have thoughts on this?
Well, the other part of this that's interesting, at least that happens in the U.S., I think, is that even within teams, within venues, sales and operations aren't talking to each other. So I've had scenarios where I had a show where, you know, we took a data load in, and then they have a group loading in an hour and a half after our keynote, you know, and it's like, okay, oh, and don't tell the client. You know, the CSM comes to me, how can we fix this? Can you help us? You know, how long is it going to take you to load out? Whereas if they, you know, if a scenario like ShowSlice was involved, we probably could have set the room in a way that then this, because they didn't have the whole ballroom. So then it became okay, well, if you just push everything into that third of the ballroom and then you can load out from there, that would be great, you know, kind of a thing. It's like, it's super stressful and nobody, you know, it's totally unnecessary. So.
Absolutely.
I see that being a big benefit.
I find that like the more stressful you make things, usually the more expensive they are too, because then it's more worrying. You have to have more systems in place, all those sort of things to kind of back you up. So my question to you guys is, you know, if we've talked a little bit about maybe like how people can save some money, putting shows back to back with each other. Have you seen any creative examples of events that you've worked with where they found a creative way to save money on their AV? For example, maybe they really wanted projection mapping, but they had a alternative solution, or, you know, oh, hey, they need audio for 1,000 people, so but they couldn't do a huge line rate because it would cost too much. They did this idea. Any examples of when you saw someone get creative with the budget to save a lot of money on AV?
Sure, I have a few. One of the things we've been doing a lot more in some events is quiet headsets. So that concept around this is a great example when you're running out of space in a large breakout. Let's say you have a lot of breakouts and they're over-attended. What we've been doing is creating, instead of creating a lot of overflow rooms or directing people to multiple places, we do one large ballroom set up with multi-screens, smaller screens, and each screen has like basically red, green, blue color. You get a headset when you walk in, and you could sit and you could watch that programming and switch to red, green, or blue. That gives you a lot of capability where you don't have competing sound across this environment. But better is for attendee experience, you could direct them to one place to go, as opposed to, oh, you know what, this session is now on the second floor in this room. It's always just go to this place and you'll see your overflow. You could experience the session that you didn't get to go and sit in.
Well, and as an attendee, if this session that's green is terrible, I can switch to blue.
Right.
Right?
You could just
not have to leave the room. Yeah.
A couple other things too is systems as this whole projection, because you mentioned it, projection mapping. Those systems are there's a lot of technology now that's getting pretty sophisticated. That is, you could do the switching and the digital media in one platform as opposed to multiple platforms. It's pretty new technology, so again, caution, you've got to really plan your show. It's got to be, in a sense, very much a straightforward timeline type of show, but there is capability to save both in crewing and core positions and quite a bit of technology.
And Tommy, and also, can you save by if it's already created? Because the gear is not as expensive as the time to create the content, right? So if there's a venue or a certain surface that organization wants to project onto for an event, say it's the City Hall in San Francisco or whatever, potentially you could save money by reusing that content.
That's correct.
Right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Awesome. What about you, Damian, Megan? Do you guys have any creative ways you've seen event clients save money on their AV?
Yeah, well, I mean, except for sharing events back to back, but I mean, small things like instead of being extravagant and using LED walls, with the 62-centimeter panels, projections are much as a good and easy substitute for that. And small things like the backdrop, instead of using set, you'd use star cloth. There's very easy fixes for the set and the stage, to be honest. And I mean, it's little things like, I suppose, I've seen events where when they actually find more out about the event. So if they've got a presenter, do they really need a wireless mic? They'd rather use podium mics. So, I mean, little things like that, actually, but nothing.
Yeah, well, to Damian's point, where we see a lot of spend that's is when you're doing breakouts, and especially if you're staging 50, 60 breakouts on some of these larger conferences, is to really settle on what are the real needs of that show. For example, 4 wireless mics across 60 breakout rooms is a pretty expensive thing if you're only using one.
And it's a lot of fiddling, isn't it?
So it's and when you think about it, just management of those wireless signals and the crew around that, that's just one example. But really, like, understanding what is the minimum breakout setup I need? What is the switching component? What does that look like? How are you going to staff that? What are the real expectations of the client? Because so often we've seen, we have 4 people in a breakout room. We really needed 2 people there because the client, it was a different expectation than what was really needed on site. So syncing up those could save you a lot of money, especially in scale when you're looking at a lot of rooms that you're trying to set up.
To piggyback on that too, I think asking the presenters what their actual needs are, because far too often you say, oh, I think we're going to have four mics because they're max. You do a survey and you find out where people are. Like, for example, you could put the room that needs 6 people, put all those panels with 6 people in one. But if you have a room that only needs 1 person at a time, you could have a smaller setup in there too. So
yeah, and the term we've been using for that is produced breakouts versus unproduced. So it's a great point because so often the team is trying to say, well, we have all of these needs, so we're going to set up all the rooms where, if you have 20 breakouts on level 1, set up one room as a really high-end produced room that's ready for camera, ready for broadcast or any of those experiences, and that's the room you put those high-level events where, that's the CEO or a marketing team having a discussion. You put them in that room. You don't have to set up all of those rooms as produced rooms. You could just do one produced room on that level.
Love it.
It's a good point.
Awesome. Any other thoughts on creative uses at all, Megan, Damian? Go ahead, Megan.
Well, I might not be creative, but mine just goes back to upfront communication. It's shocking to me how little communication goes on between salespeople and planners or producers. And as somebody who just recently was a buyer from creative companies for a trade show, there's some like basic practices that need to happen regarding communication from both ends that I think aren't necessarily happening. I had some really bad, like 4 bad experiences with salespeople in the same week as a buyer. So as a planner, as somebody who's buying these services, I think over communication is crucial, and not assuming things about your speakers, because that's happened to me too. Like they don't get the speaker writer until later, and then the planner's getting that directly and not communicating. So you have a speaker that shows up for a plenary with a Mac, wants to use his own computer, and he needs an internet connection, and neither of those things were shared with the venue or with the AV company. I mean, those are huge. And so understanding up front who's responsible for making sure that everyone understands all of those needs, and all of that is that's big.
Awesome.
And
it sounds so obvious, but it's not obvious, unfortunately.
But also not being creative, but being savvy, and just I mean, you being a DJ, DJ bring their own kit. I've seen organizers quite often put, depending on how big the event is, ask presenters to bring their own LCD projector, or they ask the band to bring their own mics. So you can get creative, but get clever.
Absolutely.
Save money.
Awesome. Well, I knew that this was going to be an awesome conversation, so I know we have to wrap up, but I knew it was going to be awesome. We still have tons more questions from the audience and from just my questions to ask as well, but we do have to wrap up, so I want to end with my last 2 favorite questions. First, what's your one tip for event planners that can help make their events amazing in 2017? Almost said 2016. 2017 to really help take their events to the next level, make their planning process easier, make it less stressful. What would be your one go-to tip, whether it's AV related or not? Damian, you want to kick it off?
I would say research. Use the Google machine. Use friends that you know. I mean, if you're in this business, you network. Know someone that's an AV guy, and ask him questions. Contact Will. I think you would be available to help people out, won't you, Will? Eh?
Yeah, absolutely.
You got questions? But I mean, you've got to research. You've got to know what you're buying first and foremost, and then you can make an informed decision.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Megan, what about you? What's your one tip?
This is self-serving, but I'm going to say it anyway. Use tools that help you be more efficient and collaborative with your team and all of your vendors. Cloud-based document storage and event project management tools they're not the future, they're now, and everyone should be using them and not be afraid to make that change. And I joke that EventCollab's not competing against other products. We're more competing against the same old way everyone's done things. And we know that giving up your spreadsheets is probably not going to happen, but if you could get your 20-tab spreadsheet down to 5 and get all those to-dos and all of the history of everything that has to do with your event inside one central place online, instead of managing time tracking in one place and using Google Drive and using Dropbox and email and requesting things through email and getting them and downloading them and having to upload them, why not just send it to do and have somebody just put the document right in the event in a product like EventCollab? It makes so much more sense.
Love it. Awesome. Awesome. Tommy?
Yeah, mine's going to be really similar, but it's hone your process and be collaborative, because I think it's the biggest part that we see missing in the events industry. Hone your process, I mean, again, if you're building the same sheet or you're building the same document, really think about that and spend your time and be collaborative with your suppliers and your partners to figure out the best way to deliver that information collaboratively between the two of you. The more time you save, but also the engagement with your partners and suppliers, the better everyone could be for that event. And to me, that's the most important thing is find a way to build better process and better documents to communicate with your partners and suppliers. But also communicate, because it's the thing. So often we're doing so many things at the last minute. With a little bit more time and pre-planning, it could be such a bigger outcome, or a bigger idea can sprout from that if you're bringing all of these people with knowledge to the party to collaborate on a task, an idea, or a problem in the event.
I love it. Such good feedback. I love it so much. All right. So now we're going to jump into my favorite section, resources. So I know you guys are full of resources. We were talking about a bunch of them before we hopped on the call. You guys were, and I know you're full of them because you guys have shared some cool resources with me. Why don't we kick it off? Let's go with Megan. Tell me, what are your like cool favorite resources right now, like books, podcasts, websites, all that jazz?
So there's a product that just got brought to my attention, which I think is pretty awesome, especially given you know, needs within venues and whether you can rely on dimensions of a room. It's called RoomScan Pro, and basically it's an app on your phone, and you put it on the wall, and it sets how far, you know, the total dimensions of the space, and you can even have, like, say the room, you know, turns like this, and there's a wall, like you get that, and it creates a room scan, a diagram of the room for you, like basically in minutes.
Awesome.
Which is, I think, pretty awesome. You know, so often we get false dimensions, right, in venues.
What do you mean?
I always sound like I'm dissing venues. I love venues. I don't want anyone to think I'm anti-venue, because we are all, you know, we all need to work together. I didn't mean that at all. But as a, you know, it's just funny, as somebody who was selling AV, so often we would get the dimensions of the room, and it's like, well, yeah, that's without a stage, or how many people they could fit. That's without a stage. That's that, you know, without this, without that, and all that kind of stuff. So anyway.
Rough. Any other resources that you want to share? Things that people check out?
I am on a podcast called The AV Life. And I have a special guest next week. His name is Will Curran. It's an AV podcast that's about all things AV. So there's a lot of talk and integration in the permanent install side. But next week is my show, and so it's going to be on live events. And Will Curran, Michelle Bruno, and Tahira and Dean are going to be the guests.
Awesome. So excited.
Yeah.
Definitely everyone's going to have to check that out. Damian, what about you? What are your cool resources that you have to share with everyone out there in the interwebs?
Well, interweb. Well, it wouldn't be such, but it wouldn't be so AV related, but more, I suppose, event related. I'm very much, and I have other businesses. I'm very much into virtual reality and augmented reality right now. Augmented reality is not quite there, but I do work with a company on that. But virtual reality, I mean, you know, what we're trying to do now, particularly in venue marketing, is you don't have to leave your home. All you need is a smartphone and a viewfinder, which costs $15. I mean, if anyone's listening to this, go out and buy a viewfinder, not those cardboard ones that do work out, but just a decent little viewfinder, $15, and seriously, it'll change your world. If you've got a smartphone, so if you own a smartphone, get a viewfinder and start playing around with it, because it is going to change the way we attend events. We can attend it from home, so that's the whole VR thing. It's fascinating. You can watch a concert, have a seat at a concert, by just sitting there in your room, and you're really immersed in it. With your headphones, the decent headphones, and it's as if you are there. And then also augmented reality is something to look for the future. I mean, for planning events, you'd go to a venue, and you'd see an empty space, but now you're trying to picture your event or what type of AV you want, what would be suitable in that space. The best is actually to stick on these augmented reality glasses in the actual venue, and you can see different types of events, whether it's a concert, a wedding, or an AGM, and that's coming. So look out for that.
Awesome. I would definitely recommend the Google Daydream VR. Just went on sale today, actually. You can get it for $50, normally $70.
Really? Good.
So if you are looking for that affordable headset, Google Daydream VR. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's compatible with multiple phones beyond the Pixel, but definitely check that one out. Tommy, what are your go-to resources?
Well, I've got a couple. One is for the techies out there. It's Blackmagic Video Assist. So Blackmagic Design is a company. You could find them online. And the Video Assist basically is a small monitor recorder that takes HDMI or HDSDI inputs and outputs into a small monitor. We bought them for our tech kits last year, and they've become this indispensable tool. What they're great for is if you're having trouble with sources. So for example, a lot of times we're setting up large demo tables with a lot of mobile devices and things as part of a corporate event. It's great to be able to just plug those devices to know, one, that device is actually outputting video before it gets through the system into all the video department and things like that. So that's been a great tool. The other nice part about that video assist is you could plug that mobile device and actually record maybe the presenter as he's demoing the product. So you could plug it in, do a quick capture of that, which then you can bring to the video team if we have to cue that or we have to do something with that information. We kind of have it as a backup of the demo ran real time. So it's an integrated recorder as well. And then, of course, the second link for me is EventCollab. Again, we really, we built this for the event community. We want to see you use it. You know, let us know how we could help you. If you really are looking for a project management solution that's made for event people, it's out there. EventCollab, check it out.
It's very, very cool. I definitely gotta give a shout out. Megan got to do a demo with me and show it to me, and I was like, man, like, if I didn't already have so many systems in place, but I definitely, if you don't have a system at all, it is a great start, amazing to use. You can log emails into it. It's super duper cool. So yeah, and same with ShowSlice as well. I mean, obviously I'm a huge fan of all the companies. That's why we put you guys on the show. So really awesome to have you guys. So we are a little bit over time because I knew that this topic was going to be so hot that we're probably going to have to do a part 3 now. I knew it was going to come because there's just so many questions from everyone to know how can we save money on their AV, learn more about AV. So really, really, absolutely, I got to give a huge round of applause. If everyone's giving a round of applause to our amazing guests, Damian, Tommy, and Megan for being on the show.
Thank you.
And next week, get ready because we have an amazing episode lined up. And I'm not going to give away any information. I already gave away that we're going to do in part 2 this week. So stay tuned for next week's episode, #EventIcons. It's going to be absolutely amazing. Thank you again to our guests, and thank you to the audience for tuning in. We will catch you guys all next week, 5 p.m. Eastern.
Cheers.
Thank you for joining us for another blog. This week's episode will be posted and available by next Tuesday. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway and join the Twitter conversation sponsored by Alex Plaxton and Little Bird Told Media. Just tag your post with #EventIcons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on #EventIcons.